So in this video, we'll talk about the basics of one-point perspective. And to start off, I have an example here of a volume, an isometric volume of the letter H. Now here's what it looks like in the front, and here's what it looks like in isometric view, wherein we have the H facing this way. So this is going to be the front, this will be the top, and this will be the right side. So when you're doing one-point perspective, we need to establish first our horizon line. So a horizon line is just a horizontal line. And the horizon line essentially represents the horizon where the sun rises and sets. But in perspective parlance, the horizon line is essentially the eye level. Okay, so what that means is you can place objects on top of the eye level, and you can place objects underneath the eye level. So let's start off by creating that H right here at the bottom, and then we'll also make that H here at the top. When it comes to one-point perspective, because it is one-point perspective, we need a point on the horizon line, and this is the center vanishing point. So one-point perspective can only have one point, hence one-point perspective. And we call that vanishing point the center vanishing point. Now the center vanishing point can be here on the left, it can be here on the right, but for our purposes, we'll just go for the center. Now, the one thing that we need to note when constructing anything in perspective is that you need to be aware of how 3D drawing in isometric works in order for perspective drawing to be much easier. Okay, because the system that you use to construct your 3D object in isometric is basically the same system that you'll be using in perspective drawing. So, for one-point perspective, here are the basic rules. For one-point perspective, all the widths will be horizontal lines. All the heights will be vertical lines. And all the depths will be going to the center vanishing point. So those are the basic rules that you need to know when you're constructing in one-point perspective. So for our H volume in isometric, we will designate this as the width, we will designate this as the depth, and we will designate this as the height. Now you might ask, can this be the depth and can this be the width? Certainly it can be. It depends on in what direction you want your H to be facing. So for our demonstration, this will be the width, this will be the depth, and this will be the height. So there are different ways for you to create that perspective view of your 3D object, but the most efficient way, at least for me, is to start with the bottom and then you work your way up. So I'm going to create that plane over here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the center vanishing point and just go this way. Now, these projections, these perspective projections, can be anywhere you want. Okay, so in this case, I just placed it right here in the center, or almost the center. It's a little bit to the right. But basically, you can project these lines however way you want. Okay, so these are our projection lines where we will be placing these two parts. So I'm just going to do this line to seal that off over here. And then I'm going to place this line in order to create that bottom plane. I'm going to do it maybe until here. Now you might be wondering, how far should this go? Should you place it like close to this line or further from that line? Any is valid, but it will depend on the measurements that we will be setting up. So we'll not talk about scales or measurements yet. We're just going by proportions. So basically you can have these two however far apart you want. So now that I have the ground right there, so this represents this bottom part, I'm now going to create the front face where the H is going to be by moving up from this point. So all heights now are going to be vertical. And then I'm going to seal off the front with a square. So that's going to be roughly there. So we have that square. That's the front. For the back, I'm going to extend the back verticals a bit, because this point represents this point. This point represents this point, and we're going to project this towards the center vanishing point, because that is now, we're going to make these, that's going to be the depth. So now you can see that there's an intersection right there with the back. So this is now where you can seal that off. So this new line is essentially this. So now you can see our cube. This is our basic cube, and then we are going to build the H inside this cube. And since this cube is below the eye level, we can see more of the top. Okay, so that's what happens when you place the object below the eye level. We can see more of the top. If you place the object above the horizontal or the horizon line, then we can see more of the bottom, and we'll be demonstrating that later on. So now that we have that, let's now build that H here in the front. So I'm just going to divide that into 3. We'll just build that H in front. Very roughly right there. So you can see that H right here. And now it's a matter of bringing these points of the H towards the back. Okay, so we're now going to use these points, project them towards the back with the center vanishing point. So starting with this one, project that to the center vanishing point. This point, project it back. Project this back. This one back. This one will go back. And then these will go back as well. Now, in order to seal off that volume, we need to find out where the other parts are. So for instance, this point right here now is this point. This point is this point, and therefore this point is now this point. So now we can bring that down. And now, from this point going here, that's now where that one side is going to be. Then we have this over here. This point right here represents this point. Bring that down to where that is. So this point now is here. Vertical line, depth line right there. So that's this, and that intersection is here. Then we can connect both so that we can get this line right here at the back. We can actually continue this line since this line goes straight down. We can roughly cover that until down here at the bottom. And then we can also continue this other side towards the bottom where that intersection is. And now we have the H. So I'm just going to darken that now. So like what we've been mentioning over and over, when it comes to 3D drawing, and it will apply to perspective as well, there will be a lot of lines, and you need those lines to help you with the placement. Also, if you're used to 3D drawing and perspective drawing, then some of these projection lines you don't even have to make because you instinctively know where goes where, what goes where, and you can build them instinctively. But when you're starting out, you would need to do all of these lines so that you can get the principle behind it. So you can, now that we have our H in 1-point perspective below the eye level, this is essentially what it looks like. Let's now build that up here. So we can build that H directly above the center vanishing point, but we can also do that at an angle. So I'm just going to go here and build again that bottom plane. So I'm going to establish it looks like this. So this bottom plane, so this now represents again the bottom in 1-point perspective. So like what we said, objects that are above the eye level, we see more of the bottom. Let's project these 4 points up. And then just to establish the height of the cube, that's going to be like that. And then for the depth, we will go to the center vanishing point from this corner over here. So now you have that. Now some of you might think that looks kind of steep for your cube. That's okay. Why? Because you're following the vanishing point. Okay? Some of you might be tempted to go this way because it looks better. Do not do that. In 1-point perspective, we follow the rules. Okay? There are instances when you cannot follow the rules, or you can choose not to follow the rules. But since we're learning 1-point perspective, follow those rules. So I have the front. Let's take that corner, go to the back. And now this is the back of our cube. Just make that clean. There we have the cube. And we will build that H in front. So once we have that H in front, that's when we can start doing the same projections for the depth. Now take note that I am not crossing the perspective projections all the way to the center vanishing point. So this is one way I'm demonstrating now how eventually you can shortcut this, because you know the rules, then you can start shortcutting things. But again, when you're learning, follow this. Make it detailed first so that you'll know how you're going to shortcut things later on. So that looks good. There. So notice that again, here we did all of the perspective projections just to show you what it's about. Here I did less because that's what it looks like when you get a feel of how to do things. You can afford to now make less lines because you know what the system is. So I'm just going to darken those lines. And there we have our H again in 1-point perspective above the eye level. You might be wondering what would happen if we place the H right in the middle. Can you do that? What if, taking this out of the scenario, let's say we have a new center vanishing point right here. Can you actually place the object overlapping the horizon line? You most certainly can. So this is going to be our bottom plane right there. We can project these up. Then establish the front. So this is now the front. Then we can now project towards the back. And these intersections will be the back plane. So here's the front. This is where the H is going to be. This is the back, where this is. And we follow the same system on how to build that H. So now I have the H in front. And then we start projecting these points towards the back. So I'm going to project these to the back. Now I can always project these four towards the back, but I know that they will be covered by the H, so I can choose not to build that. And we can now, let's do that front. And then for the back, since this is the back plane, this depth only goes until there, until the back plane. And there you have your new H on top of the horizon line. What that means now, what this means is, if, for example, you were to draw a well in 1-point perspective and you place that well over the horizon line, for example, I'm going to do a very rough well. Place our posts, and let's say your roof is triangular or a prism shape. So this now, these two posts will be hitting the bottom. So since the roof of this well is above the horizon line, we get to see underneath it. So this is underneath now the roof of the well. And since the body of the well is below the horizon line, so right here we get to see now more of the top of that well. In this demo, what we'll be doing is we're going to be taking this volume, which is a circular type of volume, and we will be doing this in 1-point perspective, wherein this is the top and these are the sides. So if you know how to construct a cylinder, then the same principles apply when you're doing it in 1-point perspective. So I'm going to start with that horizon line, and I have my center vanishing point right there. So I'm going to first establish the base or the ground where the bottom plane is. Sorry. So this is now our bottom plane. Okay, this will be the bottom. Then I'm going to project it up so that we can create our basic box. And let's say the height, I want that height to be until maybe here. So now we have that one side. And then for these two, we're just going to project these points to our center vanishing point. And now those intersections right here at the back, we'll use that to seal off our box. So in order to create the ellipse on top and the ellipse on the bottom, it's the same process in 3D drawing. We're going to X this out. I'm starting with the top plane. We X that out. This intersection now becomes our center line coming from the center vanishing point. So that's that. And then since all widths are horizontal, then we do that intersection right through the middle with a horizontal line. So I'm just going to darken that up. So as before, in 3D drawing, we try to find those anchor points for our ellipse. We start with this quadrant on top. I'm going to X that out for the 50%, then estimate that 75% and move back a bit for that first anchor point. Let's now go to that second quadrant. X that out. This intersection is 50%. Go to around 75 and bring it back just a bit for that anchor point. This quadrant on top, we X that out. So this intersection is 50%. Go to 75, bring that back just a bit. And lastly, for this quadrant, we X that out. This is 50, move to 75, and then we have that fourth anchor point, just moving it back a bit. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So now we have our 4 anchor points for our ellipse. So it's now a matter of tracing a curved line going all across those anchor points in a smooth curve. So there we have our top ellipse. Then we'll do the same for the bottom. Bottom plane, X that out. Center point, we go horizontal line. And for the line going here, we use the center vanishing point right there. Then we do the 4 quadrants. First quadrant, X that out, 50%, 75 down here, or you can use this point as a way to find that intersection. In fact, we can actually do that with the rest of the anchor points. See this anchor point right there? Instead of doing that whole 50-75% thing, since these are 2 ellipses that are the same, we can just take this point and go down. So that intersection right there, that's the second one. Same thing with this. Bring it down, that intersection. And then the 4th one, bring it down, that intersection. So this is what we mean when we say, once you know how a 3D drawing works, and you're working with the vertices and the edges and see how things align, you can do these shortcuts. And you'll only be able to do this, again, with practice and study. So now that I have my 8 anchor points, I can now create that smooth ellipse going around. And now, since we have our 2 ellipses, we can now connect the sides. And now we have that volume in 1-point perspective view. This can also apply, this system can also apply if you're doing things from the top. But remember again, when you want to do this volume above the horizon line, then we see the bottom and we do not see the top. You can also do this if you want to, or if your project requires it, you can always do this on the side. So if you want to construct more complex objects such as this one, or maybe something more complicated than that, like what you were doing in 3D drawing, you would need first to plan the object and then construct it, find that box, break down those individual elements. And then once you know that, it's now relatively much easier to translate this into 1-point perspective. So let's try that. I'm going to bring that horizontal line in first. So this is your horizon line. And let's say I want to put the center vanishing point right there. And I just want to project that stool over here on this side. So we're going to start with ground plane, the bottom of the box. Let's make that a little narrower. So let's have this instead. So I'm going to do that ground plane right here. So this now is the bottom of our box. Let's now build that box up and up. So this is now the front. Then since I have that corner, I can now go to the center vanishing point to find that other corner. Horizontal line. And then from this corner over to the center vanishing point to find that intersection, and we complete the back. So the process, again, same as 3D drawing, we will have to deal with each section one at a time. Let's first slice this box so that we can allot space for the seat, the legs, and these little cylinders at the bottom. So for the seat, I'm going to estimate that that's until here. And for the cylinders, I'm going to estimate that that's until here. So now I can just start projecting. Again, all widths are horizontal, all heights are vertical, and all depths go to your center vanishing point. So this top part, which is the seat, relatively easy because it's just a basic block. Now, once you have this one that's pretty much established, let's now go into the four legs. So I'm just going to estimate now this width. What's the width of the legs? So let's say the width of the legs from the bottom of the seat, I'm going to mark it here just to make sure that they're equal. So now I have that. I'm going to bring that down. And now we have one side of the leg. And for the other, that's the other side of the leg. And then we build that block. So project this bottom, or I'm sorry, let's extend this towards the bottom because we need this space for the cylinders. So from this corner right here, bring it in. And this corner, we bring it in right there. And then I'm just going to estimate first this thickness right here. Let's just estimate that. So I'm assuming that that's until here. Bring that down over to that corner. Now we have that one leg. Now for the cylinder at the bottom, this is that bottom point right there. I'm going to slide that in through the center vanishing point. Now I have that little corner plane right here where I can now place my cylinder, very small. And since here I also have this little plane at the bottom of the leg, that's where I place the other ellipse, and there I have my cylinder. So you'll be doing the same thing for the rest. Since this is the thickness of the leg and it ends here, I'm going to project that now to the other side. And so this intersection, this is the thickness of this other leg, which I'm now going to bring down. Seal that off. And then from this corner, vanishing point, cylinder. This bottom corner, slide that in, And then I'm going to use this line as my reference. Just extend that to the other side. And this is where the other ellipse will be for that cylinder. So solidifying that, we get now your two legs. And of course, for the back, I'm just going to slide this in again, this corner over to the other side, right there, and estimate now how wide that is. And now I have my basis for the other leg. Cylinder there, ellipse up and down, and now I have my cylinder, and there's now the third leg. So this again appears tedious when you're not used to the process, but if you practice making different objects based on isometric drawings that you might have done, then you get used to the process. Now, while constructing this stool, we know how to do the measurements of the front, because if we establish the measurements of one side, then we can estimate, okay, this width is like this and this width is like this, and that's pretty much straightforward. Now the question is, how wide should this be? Because remember, in perspective, when we go down to the depth, it starts to get smaller. So this distance, this thickness, would be wider supposedly in perspective compared to this. But how do we accurately place that in our perspective drawing? We will be tackling that in the next video where we talk about sectioning planes.